Tongge doje jajer zanron jinja mada doje bonjon ba serje lomba dawr jibega shoje jabu jodon gojant Durjin janjin dello naro dan marbom la juje gambo ba pamo juba jawan rogong ba gajwa lama namje da janje tananda nazara damje da lama laba la ye jizo Lapsan yung ten jam zu nga la wan ten zhe tong chen zhe pe ge le zo da ge lo chu son zho war sun jia lap do so chu lam dan zho war sun jia lap do so lan zhu wa se war sun jia lap do so zhu wa yi xie san jia war sun jia lap do so gang ge ten chen zhe war jiong ga ba me ba jie ba me ba Da me ba da de do me do je me zhu ba ne je je de ba zu bu zang je ma nan je dang ba de la xiang zar de ren jun za wa la ma ji je gu zong tu je xin lan da 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 ge ju lan be de da ge dang ba da sun jin je dong jia jian ba zhe ba sun je la de zo Nam ka dang nyam be sim jin tam ji ju dong de den de la na mi ba yang da ba zu bu san ji ji gong pang rum bo ji to ba sha di ji de dang be ju gan yi sin de dong nyam se la war ju nyam be sam ba jiang ju ju de sen ji ba dang qi nin be gun ju da gu long ma ner bu gu ne sen ba ren car de la gang sen ba sa be chu ne de ne dang be ju gong ba ji ba de re da de la Tereng da linta he ba ka wen du tene de la dor ji song yip ju he du yo ba le da yip ju ma ju ni de res ju ni ba de ki ju hu se ba re
Cultivate the motivation thinking. May all sentient beings, limitless as space, attain the state of perfect, complete enlightenment. And so cultivate such an motivation thinking. I'm going to listen to the Dharma and then practice it for that purpose. And such a motivation, bodhicitta, is the unmistaken motivation for listening to the Dharma. And so the Dharma we are listening to is the Buddha's single intent, the Gong Chik. And we are now in the supplement, which consists of 47 Vajra statements. And now we are in Vajra statement number 12.
Tande dorji song den chinni tikpe ceje ki chang ja song da ju chinni tikba si ban de ke ceje la sang ja gri song bare de yang tuma ma imba gi choji cha de yore de in zang jirtang da yin ki yi zer hu ba yin na yang gang da rang yin chama ke mambo ji song gu yu ren de cini ti ba si ban de ke da na ce ji lu ji la sang jie me jie si ban de la de ni wang bo ram den ke che ba yang se ne de ni wang bo da de ju cini ti ba se na je da wang bo ra bi na ce ji lu ji la sang jie ro wa dang wang bo ren yin na par du ge ne gap so sang jie ba dang de ni da wang bo ta ma yin na ji wa ju du chun che ji la sang jie ba de je dang ji bi no je cha de yo re je ta mong ke den ra wa je song de yo ba re
So it says, one can also achieve Buddhahood in a single lifetime through the causal vehicle of characteristics. And that's, again, a unique position. So, because often many others say that when one follows the causal vehicle of characteristics, now in terms of attaining enlightenment, there is a threefold division that is made. In terms of enlightenment in one lifetime and one body, as it is meant here, a single lifetime. So that also has three divisions. And that is according to someone with the highest capacity, or middling, or inferior mental capacities. So if one belongs to the highest mental capacity, then one really attains enlightenment in this very lifetime, this very body. And then the middling capacity attains enlightenment in the bardo. And then the lesser inferior capacity is said to attain enlightenment within 16 lifetimes. So that is how it is explained in general.
Teni yang dan do percent tikpa la re job percent sini tikpa shugo yore gare yin yang dan de ke myrna trami som tele pangor na trami sumchu sobden jam la sangje to gre sona dada sung ke yang yore dan de zo ke gare song yong go yore sina zo da nga la mi la matina sangje ju me bares 당 하람이 라틴의 상제 집안데 되니 하람이 집안데 하장 그 율람님 바지 대드원도 다 드나신데 제자 남고 바로.
So according to the sutra, vehicle of the paramitas or the causal and the vehicle of characteristics, it is said that if attained quickly, one attains enlightenment after 3 innumerable aeons, and even more extensively, it could be 37 innumerable aeons. So there are some who claim that, but mainly according to the highest path of the secret mantra, it is said that if one doesn't rely on the highest path of secret mantra, then one doesn't attain enlightenment. And so the highest path is therefore also called the swift path.
Tan de zo ge gua lin dang de ji gare ji lin ro yo shu ba na chu le che ba yo de ban rao ji to ni da gua lin ro yo ba chu ge to la che ba yo ma re go bo le ro ge so ne ji ge to ni gang yin ba de ne gun ji to ni yin so ji ge da ti o le ji ge da po gang yin ba de ne gun ji da po 다포 제조 그 섬을 다 제그 돈이 가연 받는 군주 돈이 인수 단데 제그 돈이 시반데 도 발신 특별 간 송버게 돈이 이나야 돈이 차도 요래라 디갑지 주가 도자 그 돈이 도 송아이나야 돈이 도 되어 버리스 베르나 주가 잠소는 척하가 양통아이나 되니 잠수 전통 랍거래요. 잠소는 저 가강통나 잠소 첨보요라. 대저 잠소 그 전통인 통이 베스나 통이. 랍거래마도 그네 저 가강통이 잠소 그 저만 통세나 세사요 말이와. 대인도 되네 추코란 것도라 제발요 말이스.
So the reason why it is understood in different ways like that is because there are some who regard the Dharma, these Dharmas, as like separate Dharmas, different, but they actually are not different. Nagarjuna had said, if one thing is empty, then everything is empty. And so according to the sutra path, the emptiness that is realized in the sutras is the same emptiness. So if you realize this emptiness according to the sutra path, you have realized emptiness. Or, for example, if you drank a handful of water from the ocean, then if somebody asks you if you drank water, then you will say, "I have drinking water," because there is no difference in terms of which one you drank. So similarly, there is no difference in the various dharmas.
대연자 제게 응을라마 개신이나 벤다송요 노아 저그 돈이라 태점장사는 바 사트바이나양 다네 시바쇼 감바른저소 감바르뉴소 다 시바 칸송코한데 다네 김누그리소 시바 칸송코한데 잠소질라 쳐질라 베 야바이나 쳐데 파감누그리소 대연자 되네 노 퍼센트 바네 저그 돈이라 tawa toni to na yang ri teni nga ndrewe tikpa toni tona yang toni le chebar yo mare se tan di kapsu zo nda songo yore ndoi kapsu teni che la tarate perna lomunguni teni le da sunam zundu da deba mugu nzom teni lamunguni ta thukning je da samje tson nzom suwa yina teni 다 조퍼싱 택바 람네양 teni 산지지 공방 스티어 산지 공방 토바 자마지 체지 루지라 상제야지 요래서
So the masters of the past have said that when one even just develops some doubts with regard to emptiness, as in if one wonders about emptiness, if one just wonders about emptiness, such wondering about emptiness has the power to dry out the ocean of existence, samsaric existence. So whether one has realized the emptiness according to the sutra vehicle of paramitas or the emptiness of the resultant vehicle of the secret mantra, there's no difference in the emptiness. So mainly, actually, when those come together, when a disciple possesses karma and merit and then practices with diligence and cultivates faith and devotion to the Guru, and then the Guru possesses love and compassion, when these come together, then also in general, from the perspective of the sutra vehicle or the causal vehicle of characteristics, one can attain enlightenment, and specifically one can attain enlightenment in a single lifetime, in a single body.
다 된도 전에 된다게 저 체크 지팅 송고 그때 송고 요리 행 되는 삼바 우보스네 솜송고 요리 된자 다 행라마 다라데 투제다 신랍 뎀바지 되는 소소가 삼바데 다고 장초성의 지신 요때 조어와 되는 우보다 소소가 냠닝게 네 도선 촉마 송바이나 되는 다 체질로질라 상제완데 저 퍼센트 발라 유바레 somebody tendra che mazom ba yina tene nga ndebe tikba yin sen za chimbu zina yang te che sangje to go mari che je lu je la sangje to go mari se loma la goya ke deba da mugu se wandare tene mugu lam jing goma se da yongding tamje jewar se bala mugu ne midmram bare chepar to nga ga kapso dara wang ju minbar se bala dambo wang go yore de yenza dambo wang de tobar se bala deni sayen sacha da che de dimba che tabe kareres na mugu teri de yorwa mugunda deni ta sangha nyamni ji yun du yang deni kareres na dorzi ti se de tri ga damba de so talk go yore ma do ke yang ngarang so choi tri de so la deni chohin ro je de azam tuba de samba ma jong ba yina deni nyamlin ji bu kap so deni yang chamza nyamlin ji dang no yong wa da che par de deni nyam do je wa le du yong ring bo ngor ro wa de so ke de yin zang de this yang samba ngu bo zong de ngi bar de chang go song go yore is.
And so, Jikten Gompo Gesonra. So Jikten Sumgön said that so there are three things that need to come together for this to happen, and that is a pure field, pure intention, and a pure kind of object or a recipient. So the pure field is toward whom we have devotion to, like the Guru and so on. And then the pure intention is to cultivate an intention of bodhicitta, and the pure object here refers to applying the crucial points of practice without leaving anything out. And if one practices authentically, then also in the causal vehicle of paramitas, one can attain enlightenment in a single lifetime. And if these conditions do not come together, then even if one considers the Vajrayana as very special and one wants to practice it, if these conditions are not together, then even through the secret mantra vehicle, one cannot attain enlightenment in a single lifetime. So what must come together is the faith and the devotion of the disciple. That is a quality that is indispensable, devotion. And then when we enter the Vajrayana, we first receive an empowerment in order to ripen our mind stream. And in order to receive empowerment, the field, the perfect field, is one's devotion. And then in order to practice the Vajrayana, we need to receive the liberating instructions. And then we also need to practice them. It's not enough to be satisfied with having received the instructions and then just letting it be and not really learning it or practicing it. So if at the time of applying the practice, we are making these kind of mistakes, then it will just take a long time to gain experience and realization. So therefore it is said that one surely needs to have those three, the pure field, the pure intention, and the pure object.
Tanda Sumgön yore namjun, mugu tanglu mebanda, mugu tanglu meba yewa meba chongwa ina, dangune lama ke dangwa lungpa tari si. Tanglu ishibaden tsamre, mugu yu dewa rao, tsamre mi dewa tawa, te tawa mayin ba. Teni mugu narma jula chewar sho sendo jindere. Mugu narma shibande, rani ga nandra, teni do nandra. Rang la chidok lini kang songjang, teni soso ke, teni gevshini la, teni mugu tele chepar meba, te tawa tone, mugu tanglu meba ina, teni ta soso la tsangwa ke, chakin chenpo je tsangyong yorwa. Teni desa tamje ke ta tahi gangla hyuba nanjin, heng samba ngubo sende ta samba hibanda la sanadana. Samba de zo soso ke semgne lok thola rogo yore ta chi janchok semri hyuyenba. Janchok sem de la kunzup janchok sem dang, dondam janchok sem ni yoba ke, dondam janchok sem de cha yong yore zo chi hyu. Dondam janchok sem go thola, teni kantar dondam janchok sem sen na yang, cha ja chimbo ngo cha de yore. Tan di ngo nde sermon de jong yong ba yina. Darang ngarang zo sem ke bob la che ma kap de ba na yi cha de yore ba. Dan de sermon de jong yong ba yina. Teni chu tam je ke chu tam ji nyang ba ni jing ngor sang je hi ban de cha ge yore song do. Den zan Jikten sung de song do. Ran sem un de jur za nas. Zhang mi song yang zumbor da song. Ta zumbor da se du zhangmi som la chosa da dakja ktumba heja to ba ta na zhangmi som la chosa ba rwa ta changje hiba na ko susu ke rang sem de sem ju ngo de ngo de jor go do som ba re de ngo de jor yong ba ina ta zhangmi som se na de ni ro go ma dok se mi sa Jikten sung go de sung go yo ra
So it is the devotion that we need should be again a steadfast devotion that is not here sometimes but not other times. That's always there. Otherwise, if one doesn't have such a steadfast devotion, then one will also not really be receptive for the instructions. And so this has to arise within one's mind. So therefore, there's this prayer where we say, may true or in sincere devotion arise within the mind stream. So that means that whether one is experiencing joy or one is sad and so on, whatever happens, it doesn't make a difference to one's devotion that one has to the Guru. So that is a condition that has to be complete. And so so that's the field, and then for the intention, as we said, one's own mind is most important, and that's the mind of bodhicitta. There is the relative and the ultimate bodhicitta, and so here the most important one is the ultimate bodhicitta, the essence of which is Mahamudra. And so when we realize, what we need to realize is the actual nature of the mind in order to attain enlightenment. So right now, that nature is somehow covered up, so we haven't realized it. And when we actualize the nature of the mind, then we realize the equal nature of all phenomena, and we attain enlightenment. And Jikten Sumgön said, when you actualize the nature of your mind, then the three endless aeons of accumulations become false. So what that really means is that, of course, the Buddha Shakyamuni is said to have accumulated merit for 3 endless aeons. But then from the perspective of enlightenment means to actualize, to realize the nature of one's mind. And when one has realized the nature of the mind, then one doesn't have to spend 3 endless aeons to accumulate merit. So this is what Jikten Sumgön is saying.
Tandala jarse shawala ke sumbatar de semche sang de machina so sem ke ne tang raw ne long raw de ha maona tene de top dungar yom do ja dewa thobar do dungar mepar do na yang tene de so ke che de da dumi chinar chamsong kandar sem ke ne tang raw de ha mawa ba desi de ntrowa de sang to ko yo mari sumbarwa Truale masangba desido tenen koale tardami bare koan trua ke jamso ta na yode arewa ngote inza ta ngarang zoke zo chikyu de namju ngarang zoke semge ngo jungjun de garchebo cha de yoba tenen semju ngo jung sibande yang tenen 다가 타마르기 히반디 ngo원데 종네 추수 까마리 남도 소소라 타마르게 남도 강주크요 바데 ngo시점 징알네 네네 데네 데라 가야 담빵랑 마제네 데네 마줄로퍼 야나 데네 란선 마줄로퍼 야나 넘버 2 소마 인도 데네 드로고요 ngaranso drog 시반데야 tene thamar ki hibandane drog hoyo ba tere ta kantar semje ngo to hibanda ya thamar ki hibandele los jirba ke ye je sem ngo hisen do chi hinje me de ba ten zang tene dan da zo chimbo jik cha de yoris.
And Shantideva had said that when one doesn't know the nature of one's mind, then even though one wants to be happy and even though one wants to be free from suffering, such a wish becomes meaningless because it will not be achieved, because confusion will not be cleared away. So basically, until confusion is cleared away, one will not be liberated from samsara. It is like one is drowning in the ocean until one becomes free from confusion. And so for that, it's most important to sustain the natural state of the mind, the ordinary consciousness. And when one sustains the ordinary consciousness, one recognizes all of the thoughts and the emotions that arise in the mind, like every minute, every hour, and so on. And then sustaining the nature of the mind then means without having to abandon these thoughts and without accepting them, without following them, one allows the mind to rest in natural, uncontrived state at ease. And that leads to the liberation of the ordinary consciousness. So when one realizes the nature of the mind, then one has realized the ordinary consciousness. So there is no separate nature of the mind. There's no other nature of the mind that is different from the ordinary consciousness.
Alright, then the yunglo tar de here go ina. Yunglo tar de here so ina in the Juntsini Tibalan, Tseji Luja Sangje Ayu Shibanda, the Ganza mix Carsoina, then that Jinkin Yori song. Data Hyogo Yosari. The Niang Nagatardu, Tseji Luja Sangje Banda, then a Hibanda, Tamang la Kawameba, Sungo Yori Denza, then the Yondando Chaka Yori Nasibanda, Tselujila Sangje Ake, the Nagan Nenga Chinke. Chusamoji chada yore den zo che chong no gongba re sin na gongba lin du da pa cha tna ling go sare de hyogo ya na wa den da la da rolling mambo yong ko yore ndo da nga ke che ji la sang je me je ke the la den du den mambo je ke den ndo ke da che ji la sang je to ko ma ri son ta je yo ko yore wa then taji yung waina lakbar den Jikten Sumgön ke jisen rangki tanda ke ta gongba lindu yang ndo ke tsejil sangje toku mari sungki nga he yung ko yore de ta kandar kona ba gongba lindang je yore ma to kona ba nordere hyo yo mari de zo che chong no gong so mari sena.
So according to the scriptures, so there's basically people with various different opinions. So there is then those who maintain that according to the causal vehicle of the characteristics, one can attain enlightenment in a single lifetime. And then as others say you can't, and according to the tantric vehicle, regarding attaining enlightenment in a single lifetime, it is said that the tantric vehicle is rich in skillful means that require the least difficulties, and it is the very path that leads to enlightenment in a single lifetime, because it is an exceptionally profound dharma. So regarding this point, as to whether or not one can attain enlightenment in a single lifetime from the perspective of sutras and tantras, there's a lot of discussion. So according to the sutra path, there is many who say that following the sutra path, one doesn't attain enlightenment in a single lifetime. But Jikten Sumgön's intent, and as followers of Jikten Sumgön, we assert his position that in a single lifetime one can attain enlightenment following also the sutra path. So basically there are different viewpoints on that, and it is just that people see it in different ways, but we're not saying that any of them is mistaken. They just have different, they treat each of the paths slightly differently.
Oh yeah, then that o the dorji song jukson bateke chu dang nyamli du je sanje je song dan de song go ande yang chepar de kan yong gor sina ndoi kap su sangje dang nga kap je sangje la yang chepar je yike yore da Jikten Sumgön ke sundu ore da tambo yin ke yiba de hyuba ina dan doi kapsu perna kuncho sum dawalan sena deni kuncho la da sanje kuncho de la perna truke shakja taba de njo nang kirwa deni chu la deni juza dang juzi ni yo banang ke tambo juzi de la denu som dang juza de la tene lapa som tene gendun de la tene tikpa chechong ge gendun tikpa chimbu gendun de tikpa chung gendun ni sena ta do tana yike yo bares tene nga ga kapsu ina ne sanje de tene longju zobaka heroka dorjinja heroka techi tene chu de la juzi de tene jude ya ja ju namjur lame gu ju ji juza de tene panza dang lanza nisme be nimi techi tene gendun sibandala tene ripan zimbe gendun senna yang che pawo dang pawo la so ba dan jo yong go yore tenza nga dan sini ni chu da nyamni gari thone na khakha na ji ya ji yong ko ba de yin ki ji chor je cha de yore.
Then is Vajra statement 13. The Buddhas of Sutra and Mantra are the same through the manner of Dharma and practice. And so that is in response to people's claim that the Buddhas of the vehicles of characteristics and mantra are not the same. So first to explain the view of these other people. So others claim that according to the sutra path, now when we explain the three jewels, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, then according to the sutra path, the Buddha is the Nirmanakaya Shakyamuni, and the Dharma consists of the topic that is taught, and then the practice engaged, that one practices. And the topic that is taught is the Tripitaka, or these three scripture collections. And the practice consists of the three higher trainings. And the Sangha consists of the Mahayana and the Hinayana Sangha. According to the Tantric vehicle, the Buddha is the Sambhogakaya, Haruka, Vajradhara. And the Dharma, the topic of the Dharma that one receives are the four classes of Tantra, the Kriya, Charya, Yoga, and Anuttara Yoga Tantra. And then what is to be practiced is the path of abandonment and adoption or practice according to the secret mantra. And the Sangha, it consists of the awareness holders or the knowledge holders, or also Dakas and Dakinis. For this reason, because the three jewels are explained differently in sutras and tantras, there are people therefore who claim that these dharmas and the way they are practiced are different.
Jikten Sumgön gi bala chu da nyamlin du ji sanje je song du chu da nyamlin ji tang gram to ni tene sanje ge sala tene rudang de jikpa cha de yore so da rudang jikpa re song du per na tambo ndoi kap so kuncho som song tela nga kapsu tsawa sum chigo yore. Ndo ge pena sanje kuncho shibanda, di nga kapsu lama shibanda cha lapar da nga sarma, nga zonda zo ina, ta lama sanje lama chu, tene lama gendun, tene songo yorwa ta lama sejonde, tsachi kanche chik songo yongo yore, tendu, kanda lama ta sanje yirmi chado yorwa dorjin chang. Tene, 너의 값을 취근초 시반데 되니 알아서 가 값을 이칸다 예담시 라마 예담 진짜 저도 잡았음지데 되니 다 너의 값을 취 시반달라 무중당 망보 요래 알아서 따라 취 빼차 너서라 취 게다 착해제 저 요래 충분해 돼 godin la zeno yorwa godin lamdin la lamji din bala ten za tene ta eri yadam de zo tamche lamdin chade yore kansa nyam to chade yore nyam go topu ke challe chan chong do yore wa yedam chi ban da so ma to ran sin ba ji me wa yedam ran sin ba ji yedam ran sin ba ji ngu zong so ai na de ne de Gong Chik na Jikten song go song sare wa de ni hyo gang da da ra de zhen tan zin ba tam ji ran ju ba se na dan da yin zang ran sin ba yin so na de ni hin ba da jing wa chang ma jie yo zang ran sin ba yong nin ka yo ma re la cha yo ma re si de ni do yi kap so nga rang so gen dun si ta chir tang gen dun de la do yi kap so yin na yang gen dun si ban de gen long yi de yin che la gen dun ba si na pa bu gen dun si zhen ro yo ba re de ni nga kap so nga rang so de ni kan ro de ni la ma yan dang kan ro si ba dan de sun na de ni dang gen dun si ba de dong ji ba cha de yo re ga yin si na gen dun si ban de san ji ge tin ba de ma nyang ba zin jing per ne de ni yin la pin do zhong kin je gen dun si ba dar de nga kap so den kan ro dang chu jong ba wo dang kan ro de so ge de ni zhou xian ne de ni去da nyam lin tam je la zhou dan chen le je ge yo ba de chen de ji ba cha de yo ro
And so Jikten Sumgön is saying that the Buddhas of Sutra and Mantra are the same through Dharma and practice. So the way to enlightenment and so the ultimate achievement of enlightenment and then following the stages to enlightenment in essence are the same, because it leads to the same fruition of enlightenment. So in the sutras, and so here we are showing how they are the same from the path of the sutras and the tantras, how they actually are the same. And so we have said the sutras, how they recognize the three jewels in the sutra path. So in the sutra path we speak about three jewels, and in the tantric path we speak about the three roots. And now according to Jikten Sumgön, in the sutra path, the Buddha, which is like the Buddha jewel in the sutra path, is the guru or the lama. So we have the three roots, the lama, yidam, and dakini. So the Buddha jewel, according to the sutras, would be the lama in the tantric path, and especially according to the new tantric tradition. It is said in that tradition that the lama is the Buddha, the lama is the Dharma, and the lama is also the Sangha. So the lama, the guru, is considered to be most important, most precious. So the lama is the Buddha jewel because the lama is seen as indivisible from Buddha, from Vajradhara. And then in the sutra path, one speaks about the Dharma jewel, and that corresponds to the yidam of the tantric path, so of the lama, yidam, and dakini, the three roots. The Dharma would be the yidam. And so that is because there's many different ways of understanding what Dharma actually is. And the scriptures containing the Dharma are just like a fraction of the Dharma, an aspect of the Dharma. But it is said that the true Dharma, the actual Dharma, is the path of the truth of cessation and the truth of the path. And the yidam is actually the truth of the path, because it is through the yidam that experiences and realizations will arise. And so that is if one practices the yidam in a non-ordinary way. If one sees the yidam in an ordinary way, then because the mind then becomes ordinary, as before Jikten Sumgön said in a different verse in the Gong Chik, when one is grasping at various tenet systems views, one becomes ordinary. And when one is ordinary, then there is clinging and grasping in the mind. And then it doesn't become the authentic truth of the path. But if practiced authentically, then the Yidam deity is the Dharma, because the actual Dharma is the truth of the path. And then regarding the Sangha, according to the Sutra path, a community or a gathering of 4 Sangha members, or 4 monks ordained, is called an assembly of the noble Sangha. And according to the Tantric tradition, that corresponds to the assembly of the Dakinis, Dakas and Dakinis. So this assembly of Sangha and this assembly of Dakas and Dakinis have really the same meaning. There's no difference. So regarding the Sangha is someone who upholds the Buddha's teachings, preserves them, and increases the teachings, someone who benefits others. And this is also what the Dakas and Dakinis and the Dharma protectors, according to the Tantric path, are doing. They are the assistants of the Dharma practitioners. They enact enlightened activities. So they are the same as the Sangha, as described in the Sutra path.
Dan de chu dang nyamlin ju je sanje je song de ba kap je nyamlin de dang teni gang la song song jin hi lam na sab ju du ba je xie dong da ji ba re teni gang la da sa ju du ba ji ba re xie dong re da de de sa ju
sa chun du ba khara ji ba re
doi kap sa ju du go re
도당아.
다 데두 너의 값 사줘들 휴신바리 강라 휴신바리 데네 nga 값 사줘들 휴요 말이 데는 데콜라 중세 휴바이나 너의 값 사줘 시반데 당 nga 값 사줘 시바더니 맹 라요 말이스 얘나 너 냠린라 사죠 두고 봐진도 nga gnyamin kapsa sacho dugo yore sanje parsibala tenza da nga kapsa de Jikten song song ro jirtang lula da zamdu chuksom chorya yore song teni da luk zamdu de so chortang grambo thoni deni sa hibanda ya sa himade sa da lam hibanda soso ge nyam da toba la go yorwa denza deni sa da soram je kompan ro yore so
so the Buddhas of Sutra and Mantra are the same through the manner of Dharma and practice. And in a previous verse, we said that the 10 bhumis have to be traversed in the Sutra path as well as in the Tantric path, in that they are the same. And so we already mentioned these 10 bhumis according to the Sutra path before, but not yet the 10 bhumis of the Tantric path. So just to briefly mention something about that. So there's 10 paths of sutras and the 10 paths of the tantras may be only different when it comes to the terminology or the words. But actually they are the same in that they lead to enlightenment. In order to attain enlightenment, one has to progress through those 10 bhumis when one practices the sutras and also when one practices the tantras. And Jikten Sumgön also had said that these paths that we traverse are related to the release of knots, the channels of our body. So he says that there are 13 different knots in our body, of channel knots, like entangled channels that have to be unknotted or kind of released. And as one releases them, knot by knot, one progresses on the bhumis and the paths. Because what the bhumis and the paths really are is the development of one's experience and realization.
Tande sa jerdan zamdu juksum shibande tang yang zamdu sumchi zani sumchi soni zawala soba
Tsani and sonira.
sumchi soni zawala soba yongo yore de kon de hipcha roman ro ge chepa naw je insare hipcha za na za koran nang lo la yang za ne hipcha pa devendu da gandar de so de jungze de gal je hyuba nan de hyo go chang ko yore de la de in za di ngak ka so sa hibande deni dara zamdu juksom dro deni ngaran chola tham dara thamar jilong ni chuk dong ni chik dong jugja yore thamar gelong chuchu ni kha gyu na jyon do ya ji de jang go yore de so pa jang ne thamar gelong de jang go yore wa 대 장당대 되니 롱포와 주니 세네 저거 요래 다 더소 그 럼버토니야 간달 자롱 라소발라티네 마다바게 되니 자다 롱당 더소 되니 다붕고라 저 장용가 인데 대렘지 다 사람도 저 누구 요래 소마레
So we speak about 13 knots of the channels, and sometimes also 22 or 32. And when they are expanded like that, then we're talking about that there are further knots within the main knots. And so just to mention a few words about that here, since this is the verse talking about that. There are 13 main knots of the channels that are to be liberated. And it is said that within a 24-hour period, within one day, when one breathes ordinarily there are 21,600 wind movements in a 24-hour period. And so these need to be purified. The winds need to be purified. And so there are what is called a transference of the winds. There are 12 transferences of the winds. And so, which is a practice. And so thereby, through these transferences of the winds, one's impure channels and winds become transformed or purified into the pure essence of those channels and winds. And so as one gradually purifies the channels and the winds in this way, one progresses gradually on the bhumis and the paths.
단데 롱포와 주니 시반데 조치휴 다 데베 장커는 너니 조 윈도네 드니야 장 바 되네 데엔드
데발라 가르치고래
데베 장커니 야 롱포와 주니 세라 롱포와 주니 롱포친 동 포총스네
이나 데바 골라 가르쳐
데발라 장커 요라
데라 가르치
드니야 저 고요라 롱포와 주니 브라단데
지도기압도
지도기압고 롱포와 주니 데 당에 샤로 저당 라요 데 롱포와 주니 데 데네 다라데 조세네다 데다 마 다른 인도 데베데 롱포와 주니 세반다 다다안데 간다 사주니를 두용바당 데니 죽섬 돌진제 사센다 상하 값소 사죽섬 이요로바 데인데 다 로단데 단다레스.
So there are those 12 transferences of the winds, and mainly now they are considered to counted starting from the navel chakra, and more on that later. But as we gradually purify through these 12 transferences of the winds. One attains gradually the 12 bhumis, and when one achieves the 13th bhumi, according to the secret mantra, one has attained the 13th bhumi of a Vajra holder.
Jirtang de sangha kapsu zak changka zhen du za dongcha dunju dongni zhen yore.
Katsu?
Dongcha dunju dongni. De dele pa de na zhang mi ba song ne de zapchen zhang mi ba cha de yore song go yore. De bo ge ming de na ge zhen du za dongcha jia che ba de zhen do. Dongcha jia che ba zhen. De mang de gang da ya da ra nga zo jikten song go ge de la za dongcha dunju dongni zhen zai ge yo song do. De yin za de ni dan de zan de so jirtang nga rang zo jiu le zan da jie de ni rinba la ju zhou de ni ningka la jie de wa la zhu ji re bi de ni san ne la zan da sun ju song ni de da zhe nang ge yu re de zang kou ge ren bu to ne zhe dang de.
So, according to the secret mantra, the secret mantra counts the channels in one's body, and the body consists of 72,000 main channels, and then there is an infinite number of subsidiary channels. According to Tibetan medicine counts 80,000 channels. But now here, Jikten Sumgön is speaking of 72,000 channels. And then the main chakras is first the crown chakra, which consists of 8 main channels, the throat of 16, the heart of 8, and the navel of 64, and the secret place of 32.
Da de long da de ni zhi qi dong zhu jia xi ban de re de chu zu ni xi za yin na long ni zhi qi dong zhu jia jiang ge yu re song do de ne de dan de na yi xi ge long sen na ka zang yi gang le jie xu yan ba yi xi ge long zhu jia de qi dong a yu re si
zhu jia de qi dong So then for the winds, there are 21,600 wind movements that occur within a period of 24 hours, so within one day. And it is said that, so that's the ordinary winds now, and that it is said that there are 675 wisdom wind movements.
Ta de long ni zhi qi dong zhu jia ji ban de di ta de wo ge za qian ni zhe ta za wa de yin la ge long za long a yin la ge long de zhang me ba yo ra ta de le su ba chen de wo ge de zang ke la chen de ne de ni ren ji ju ne de ni de wo zang ke la ya le ne de wo zang ke ni de ni da ra de za wo men nang de ya yong du de ni de la so long ge ne ba ji ge song do.
Tan nyam len ko la shi ra.
Nyaming ko ra.
Chitang ma lag ma ra. Chitang lung to tang la ma ra.
Chitang kon ra de chitang no.
Ina ti phoba lung chuni de la ma ra ba tan da.
Tin na yo ra.
Tin la yo.
Tin
ra yo. So there's 21,600 wind movements and in a day. And so now in the practice, one first gathers all the winds to the point below the navel. So that is the 5 main winds and then many branch winds. So they're all gathered at the point where the channels converge below the navel. And then they rise and come up to the navel, the actual navel chakra. And then they enter into the central channel, and it is that in this way, the power of the life-sustaining winds increase.
Da de ge za wo men na le na so long ge ne ba de ji cha de Teni remji, teni zaro jangi ju ne nawo ni pa long ni pa sala dong ro gri sten za ngaran so nawo ni long dong do wan da na so long yo re sung do. So long.
나오나 솔롱요래.
So long ju sa de nawo ni pa ja sa. Yong sa za wa ma ni yong ra.
So then we have entered into the central channel. And so having entered into the central channel, the power of the life force winds is increased. And then they rise and come into the left and the right channels and come to the nostrils where we exhale. And it is said that it is that wind that comes through the nostrils that is the life force wind.
Ta de ndu ngaran zo da koba na dara de njwa nga klong yor ba. Njwa nga klong de koba na njwa re klong de sumja trukje. Di sumja trukje de cho da nga yor ba njwa nga la long sumja trukje re de wen du chomdo long jikdong jebja. Ra jikdong jebja. Di long jikdong jebja de teni podang riri kato ne teni tarate long puwa riri zizang ko da podang riri kato ne.
Bena o tongling la shi gire.
Podang riri to ne.
Ji chik chi gire. Ni chitong ge gyara.
Jikdong jebja riri la teni tarate long puwa riri zizang.
Di riri chi gire ra. So then we have also the winds of the 5 elements in our bodies, and then for each of those 5 elements, there are 360 winds. So because there's 5 elements, there's a total of 1,800 winds, and these 1,800 winds are counted as one wind movement.
Ta de the long puchin juni na ka che yore perna long juwang ga long jik chi je dong de chor joren du juni le joren du ni chi jik dong truk ja cha swa ta ni chi jik dong truk ja na de na yi shu ga long truk ja din chi dong a yore is
ka che
truk ja din chi dong a yi shu ga long.
So then these 1,800 are one of those movements. So we've said there is 12 wind transferences or major wind movements. And so one of the 1,800 is one. And so since there's 12, then we have 21,600. So multiply by 12. So we have 21,600 wind movements in a day and 675 wisdom wind movements.
Ta de de perna salong da jik le chung ba ina sa ga long salong se po da jik le chung ba ina de ne ngaran chu ka se jo yore sina sumja truk jo yorwa sumja truk jo na de yi ga long juk jek zam yore is ta kan ta long du so perna cha he se de cha he sumchu soni ra wala cha gu ba ina long cha ma long cha sumchu soni la gu ba ina de na yi ga long cha jek zam de yi ga long cha de yore song do de zang ngaran so nam ju long pa slo ne pa don ro yan de yi ga long de ka che pa slo ne don song wa yin na yang ngaran so che dang de so la de sa nu hu che da su nam se wan de la nu ba cha lun jo ro wa dang ta ngaran so nam ju long zong wa la so ba tam ji ji ndu de ne de bo la ko long pa jin de so ran yin ge zong de na de ne su so ge je kam dang kam de so de bo cha wa dang de ne de la so ba ge che reng wa la so ba la ping ge is chen de ge da ba la chang so ba ina.
So for example, just taking one example, the winds related to the earth, which are yellow, there are 360 for the earth winds, 360 movements, and of these 360 earth winds, there are only 11 movements of wisdom winds of 360 ordinary winds. So one could say that if a whole, 100% is made up of 32 parts, then one part of 32, 130, 1 divided by 32 part would be the part that is a wisdom wind. And it is that when the wisdom wind is expelled out, the more it is expelled outside the wisdom winds, the more our merit and our lifespan degenerate. For this reason also there are various practices to practice with the winds. For example, we are practicing the vase breathing, where we are retaining the winds below the navel. And that also leads to physical well-being and so on, and longevity, and the attainment of ordinary cities and so forth.
Dawa chöy rang yin sik, da dawa da nima tama ngarang zo de zalong no yo de ba ji cha de yorwa. Den zo dawa chöy rang yin ji malam baba. Nima me rang yin ji yalam baba. De ni ke Quran ni ya yong da mando ni de kha te ne de de bo la. Das sa ja wo gong ne ma yin ba ko rawap de. Rawap rang
Marting on la khare.
Dawa chöy rang yin ji malam baba. Nima me rang yin ji yalam barwani Korani tini katu ne. Katu sate tini ere tebo bola ta katu ne tada ji indu tini yungdi mambo yoban nangke zo zungzin gen zimba tamje xian yin gui re si. Rang yin ke zungzin gen zimba tamje. Ta lula yungdi kare te ma te te ta hi solong to so yi hi glong zena yi hi glong to so tsar nang zin ta ba zang ke 다 랍체 잠 지바는 치미 차이 거로 휴허요 간다 때 담지 드니 연구 우승 거요래 팀들 토니 때 드니 따라 다 중지 님이게 다 이히 또서 제거하이나 드니 롱 따라 범파진 세반데 조차도 요바 드니 더라양 망본 담다 무고 봐 드니 코 라와 걸롱데 드니 다 다롱데 걸 망보지메 So
when we are holding the winds below the navel, that's called the vase breathing, and that in itself has inconceivable many benefits. Just to mention one, so when we practice the vase breathing, then it is said that we are bringing together the sun and the moon winds. So the moon, which has the nature of water, is moving down, and the sun, which has the nature of fire, is moving up, and then the sun and the moon are meeting at the navel and form like a capsule like that, like an enclosure just below the navel. And that is within this enclosure, within this union of sun and moon, the winds are retained. And there are many qualities that come from that, but mainly what is achieved through that is that the dualistic grasping at subject and object diminishes, it falls apart. And also there are many physical qualities that arise. So we have said that if we are able to retain the wisdom winds, and to some extent, then qualities arise, and ultimately the city of immortality is achieved. And ultimately one realizes the primordial wisdom that is non-dual, without subject and object. And so a method to realize that is to practice the vase breathing below the navel. So And so there is, basically there's not much that has to be done, aside from kind of letting the winds settle there naturally. And so anyways, there will be more on that in a later Vajra statement, so I will not mention too much here now.
Tene da kantarandare ta hi zamdu hyondo yanda zamdu hibande la ta changka zidangji mandawa de deso yonggo yore de kantarando zo wanye la tine tene soso ge za ge zamdu zhor se ta zamdu de yang jertang leg long topji de cha ngu ndo wa za na that young that mambo hian cholu sara mas ti that samdu ich ban de leg long top je de dong ge yo ba de na ji ri ya den za ta tin ngarang so ge za dang long ge nyam ni gen ru le tu ne nyam ni ji dang ge ren ba thon ni de ni wang ye la jar du de ni wang yi to ren yin du de ni so so ge 다 잠두도 소름에 좀 좋은 거요 봐. 잠두들 다 간단 두방문에 지유도미 스지데 데서 제발 송다만다지 요데바래. 맞아. 되니 된자다 다다위는 다 잠두데야 조린 인도 되니 사람 사대름 지름지 야토는 거요 말이스. 나갑스. 된도 탈드나 되니 가르쳐도 이르스나 longsan de longsan ya tera za woman ni ya jin la ya de hin ro de de ni de la de ne ngarang zo ge je ban za ge to ba ma bo je da ma da ba to ba ma bo je ran yin jing ga yong ba la so ba ge yong din chen bo yo ba o da to so la de ne de ni da nga ge gap so de ni juk sum dor jin sim sa se na sa juk sum ba de top ji yo ba de ni 10% de bokapso jertang ka sa ba sa shi de ba de jang chou ba sa shu ge yore de ne sa juk je ba de juk je gun du sin da san je ga sa da ba lang mun zin ro ge yore de yin zang da nga ga kap su salam de za gang dar za de long le jar ge yore si de ne da long da hian cha hu hie de ne pa jiang hier qian zhao len zhao cha ge yore ma do ge da ngarang zu da ra de de wu zang kor na na de ne da ra de da za qian yu ban de so tam je de ne pa sel da ben de kor na ne se tu jun ko lo nang tu jun ko lo yin tu jun ko lo sen song ko yore de za se nang yin som se de ne dem cho la so ban de so ga ne se nang sang som sen song ko yore the gang dar yang slog nyama dan dawa karma tene nyama chimju ndo so tene nyama gan ro dang dawa khor dang mar sa ko la dang te kar so so ge chak dang tham ji tene so so rang ge lu ge nang ge dor ju lu la rang che so yo de ba dor ju lu na yo de ba tene dor ju lu de ge ne ga hi na tene ta jing da rang shi de so la so ba mang bo je di ge ne wa to ni 제 연구요 받아서 가시에 기타지는 연구요래 가시양 망보 망자로 그럴 때 해 되나 된상
So we have said that the numbers of knots in the channels varies, so it is counted in different ways. But it is said that through receiving the four empowerments that these knots in the channels become released. And first, the knots in the channels are created through the karmic winds. And then as we receive the four levels of empowerment, they are gradually released. And so then there is a much different opinions as to whether or not there are real, like substantial, true knots or not. But in any case, according to the tantric path, as one gradually releases these knots in the channels, one progresses along the various stages of the bhumis. So the wind mind has entered into the central channel, and as it is moving upward, it purifies various knots, and in doing so, many impure concepts and thoughts and so forth come to an end in that way. And then ultimately, according to the tantric path, one speaks of 16 bhumis, so ultimately one achieves the 16th bhumi of a Vajra holder. And according to the sutra path of the causal path of the paramitas, there are the 10 bhumis, which are the bodhisattva bhumis, and then the 11th bhumi is called a full luminosity, all luminous, and that is identified to be the state of Buddhahood. So according to the tantric path, those bhumis and paths are related to the way in which we release the knots in our channels. And as that could be, we can go into that in great detail, but it may be too much. For example, how the tantras speak about the different channels and the release of the knots and so on. In the Kala chakra, for example, it speaks about outer, inner, and other Kala chakra, and Chakrasamvara speaks of outer, inner, and secret. So on the body level, it is said that on the outer level, the outer sun, the moon, and the stars, and so how they are moving, how they are orbiting, their special characteristics, how they go around and so on. All of that corresponds to the nature of one's own Vajra body. It's the same within one's Vajra body. So when one realizes the nature of this Vajra body, it is said that from this realization, many different kinds of supernatural powers are accomplished. And so about that, there is also more later. We just don't want to say too much.
다른 매라 요래 용거 요래데 자다롱 틀리고라 항아랑서 드로마니 그 짝직 다바른 돈데 까마 동차 초분 남지 세완데 항아랑서 주보가 짝 나나고 틀레드서 차단 그런 바 송용거 요래데 남정아서 다바른 돈거 요래 드로마니 그 짝직
티
까마 동차 초분 남지 다 디콜은 제히 되니 드로마니 그 짝직 걸은 제히 휴두 휴심바인지다 then 다라들 효과야라고 가르쳐리시나 자달론다 틀리송 땡아랑저 도르줄루세 고ян데 저속 접당 그 토니 되네 도르줄루란 이게 차대요 봐 데레 되네 롱히반다양 아랑저 조 데버라 란잉게 롱데 종 저때 가르침벌이 있었네다 양세 라마게 비신난 배송거 요로와 되네 집어도 다랑아랑저 답변은 나오니 팔롱 전라한데다 손아양 되네 중앙아 그 롱들라 카도 만다요 바데 되네 강는 되게 휴심 바리 되네 된서 코랑 중앙아 그 롱도서 되네 파주드 타링통 가세설 주거래 도솔라 제발 요리 송거 요리 베나 살롱 다베이나 소르주니 잠나다 파주 되네 렘지다
소르스나티라
소르주니 잠나 되네 다파 링아테 소르주독 잠나 조거 요리 선 중앙인 담제 그 롱 주니니 야 렘지
다 살롱 그래
안다 사글롱
단라 그래
사글롱데 주니 소르주니 잠나 데 남정 가서 다 디토니
주독
주니니 주독 받더니 사 저메롱
아서 셴바던서
다른 휴대 소르주독 잠나 다 파조거 요리시 되네
And so there will be more on the channels, winds and drops later. And before, we already had teachings on the 21 taras, the prayer. So there's one about like 1,000 stars and so on. And so that also is related to the channels and the subtle elements and so on within one's body and how they come into being and so on. And so in any case, the Vajra body of channels, winds, and the drops, the subtle elements, exists naturally. And the spiritual masters have again and again advised us it's very important to hold the wind energies below the navel. And then when we exhale the winds through the nose, we are exhaling the winds of the 5 elements, which each have different color. So for each of the 5 elemental winds, when it is exhaled, has a different kind of a different distance. So it goes that far. So with one exhalation, the wind is exhaled. If it's the earth wind is exhaled 12 finger width. So 12 fingers. That's how far it goes. And the longest one of the 5 elements would be 16 finger width.
Tate long to sopan sor manyong roya and the soyang tene long korang ki yungtin chechong latine chepara yuri sungko yuri. Tete the kantayang ngaranzo do da nga nika la sapjo rugo ba de jikpa imba la tene doi ka so panza pane yenda tene sate rim jerem jitsar ta salang ko to ba de susu jula jeka yoba. Tene nga ka kapso 다 짜다 롱라서 반다서 라틴에 데네 렘지 사람고 또바 제크 요반다레 다 나가 갑서 차람다 졸람시니 짜롱라 토니다 냠니 지바달라 차람다 졸람니 요바난게 직팅 숭공게 졸람조 지긴 숭레 다 졸람조 지인데 다 짜다 롱다 두서 감라서 바다 닝은진나 하고네 데네 소소게 다난 강라 슈바나이 간사 som 야소 제 소수 먹을 달람시나 띵바다 제다 다라 강 휴바나 이다 잘라라서 말 띵긴 제당 되니 다 이제다 준르 소소그 준르 다다 도솔라래 부터네 된다 영화지 요아 된자다 다랑랑 존데 하고가 가르침보 차도 요래 되니 제발도 다 노당아 이바데 제발 메베차네 제발 강양 메바래 제 넘버 문에 신 차르주리데 너의 값서 제 자당 롱도서 걸어 춘이 요사마리 진 키요나 내가 셈라마난 데서 지니 용거를 너의 값서 자가다 롱그 가나토니 송거요바 되니 다 탈랑고 타오네 만다와제 요르베스네 요레 내 띵띵레 탈랑고 토네 만다와 인디 띵랑 밥당 그럼부터니 동아 제발 용거를 너의 값서 조 되네 주저가 따와줘 진은 송로요레 주저줘 진은 송용거요레 되네 나지값서 다 대동그 찾아침보세네 되네 대다고 그도네 다저 대동그 남니 되네 냠리 낭 봐요 봐 낭고요 봐 인자 탑랑거 돌아만다와 띵디요 바레스
So the length and as far as the winds are exhaled, they're exhaled in different lengths due to the winds having different qualities. And so anyways, as you mentioned before, the fact that we have to progress through the 10 bhumis is the same in the sutras and in the tantras. In the sutra path, as one gradually abandons what needs to be abandoned, one progresses along the bhumis and the paths as one's realizations increase. And in the tantric path, one progresses along the same bhumis and paths as one practices with the channels and the winds. And in the tantric path, it is that there is the path of attachment and the path of liberation. And of these two, now when it comes to channels and winds practice, and of these two, Jikten Sumgön's path is the path of liberation. As you mentioned before, when it comes to the practice of these channels, winds, and drops, and their recognition, there are 3 kinds of individuals. The first one is one that has great devotion to the Guru and receives the Guru's blessings. And the second one is the one who follows this path of attachment. And then the third one is the one who practices with diligence. So that's also an important point to understand for us. So in that sense, there is no difference between the sutras and the tantras. And you've also heard about that before. So if you might think that in the sutras there are no, it doesn't speak about the channels, winds, and drops, then you shouldn't be concerned. We will come to that later as to how the channels, winds, and drops are also occur in the sutra teachings. So there is really no difference, but where there is a difference is the path of skillful means, the path of practice. So there certainly are some differences in this regard. But when it comes to what is to be realized, then it is the same. In the sutra path, it is mainly referred to as the view that is free from elaborations. And in the tantric path, it is referred to as the empty bliss of Mahamudra. So it's the path of empty bliss. So the path is slightly different.
Maon Bacapso, Teniche T, Semte Sada, what the Maran de John Roje. Then Semden Zim Matabatavan Roje. Chimti method in Yam de la Gomja Devana, method of Semko Zonta Devano, the Nadoje, Chepra Yunguyore. Yana Dranimbo, Jina the Gonjana, Jat of Devan Roje, Yunguyore. Wognam the Gomja, Nana the Wognam the Gomja, then Gomja Matab de John Rolam, San Yaman and Yishon Atang. Yamana J. Namto the Yimi Yin Chondo on the Tao. Then Yamyo Hugh Yun don't human data. Yin a Pimpichi, the Karina Lapcho de Tene. Ta Wog de la Ya Yamyong Kang Kansan, a told the Tambo, a told the Jan, Wog de la Sangre Tranka, Sangre Wog Churli, now the days of Zong, Teni Panga, that the solar would stand on ten, that Jake de la Comde. Then Kale Wog Yam the Gonjayan de la Jikten Tonamas and Dochana, Chapano, Yajen, Scarlacoche, Yendo, Honora, da or Wognam the Gonjan, Chibonos. Jimsin Garisena, Wognam the Gonjan and the Yunti Mambo Huge Yodeva. J. Garisena, oh, Nala Gomjaya, Mikti Madosa, Sanon Nayamiba. Choran Lang de Nayang, Niar de Nayang. 다 니데나 야모 요리데 니도 보가서 검자 통긴 용용 자그 요리데 간다 옥세야데 메비악 투수제 요마로 사마 사체야 옥 요리 계자 히체야 옥 요리 다데 제 옥세제데라 말한서 곰딩 그차네 나 뒤다 나바군데 말한서라 데 곰딩도 요데바지 차데 요바 데니 용딩 치아제 가르스나 옥냠도 검자 안데 옥데라 데 잠근 짐바 흉첨보 Zimba Hukjimbo, Humundova, walk around la. Co walk the part and the Tangur Sutherland, Chik Tanzing some on the Tanzing some on the Medeva, Tahibok Jondo at the Hain, Samyak some on the Medeva. The Nico walk Saba, Pajua, Sergiata, De Zanatimba, Mayamba, walk Joyo Bahaqua, some Jen, Tintalan to him, so Jama then. Then Tandano in the Tawok Tola, Yami Nanjude, Garchimbo in the bar. And the Garchi Yambade, Sanje Jumden there, that Sanje Barre, Sanje the Lam Ganiting Baresina, Kong Tambo, Namba, Majupo Kanda, Nevi Bala Pepsunda, Wugla, Tokde de Barwa. This is a Namba Chane, that Namba Chane, that Gandar Job Sang Jetardia, Taron, Give John Tamjela, that. Gendun Tamjela, walk the Tony, then Yamselin down the Tola, the song on Dotam Jenna. Then around to Sanje Jumdin, the Jisen Ranking and Kone, then it Tamkilla took Chimbo, or Jinja in the Aranzola, then Garek Pinhindo, Gare Yakindo, Gare Jumdeto, the Gone, Tambo Tabla Cat, then it took Chimbo, Nick Tone, then Aranzola, tanda tsayong bari ten za ngarang zo ke ngune ta gom jaya de wok to nyam de jatam na tambo chorche ke gom wok to nyam de jaji yore teni kala kala chormi ke gom te wok to nyam de jaja yore teni dela gom la tin saja chimbo to so dangwa na so gom la tin je da timi ni le timi ke gom ne se te wok nyu ngap ti ton so yang de timi ke ton ne gom ja dang we na ya de ke yore te dela yung tin chimbo yore ndo dang na kare wan se ba ina ya dela wok ton ne gom ja jin de da wok dang ndo so ka tola nyamni na ju te kar chimbo cha da yore
So it's actually, according to sutras and tantras, both very important to use the breath, one's air, when we are meditating. It's considered to be a very important part of the meditation. Even when we are not, when we are meditating, shamatha, for example, and when we are focusing on our breath as our focal object, then as you're focusing on the breath and that becomes stable, then later on it becomes without any reference. There is nothing there. Later there is no reference point. So for example, that's different than when we are focusing on a flower. For example, if the flower is our focal object, then we have a kind of a material thing that the mind is holding on to. Or when we are using a pleasant sound as a focal object, it also becomes like an actual thing that's there that the mind is focused on. But when you're meditating on the winds or your breath, then the breath is something that is always there. So you always have meditation in that way. Whatever you do, there is breath in all your activities, and even when you go to sleep, and so forth, or when many thoughts arise. So I'm not saying that I myself have much experience with that, but I thought that might be beneficial. So when you're focusing on the breath, there's different methods that are explained. We can either count our breath, or we can just focus single-pointedly on the breath, the inhalation and the exhalation. And so we slowly and gradually become habituated to that. And also it seems that the focus on the breath has the quality of there's something that is that kind of is making one happy or is enchanting. It's like it's something that we might be naturally also attracted to, because when we focus on the breath, many qualities can arise from that. And also when you have the breath as a focal object, then you are never without any focal object, because it's always with you, whether you're sitting or whether you're lying down or you're sleeping, you always have your breath, you're always breathing. So maybe when we are sleeping, not so many are meditating, but you're never without breath. Or when you're eating, you have your breath, or when you're talking, you have your breath. So you actually have your focal object for meditation always with you in that way, if you focus on the breath. And so when you focus on the breath in your meditation too, there is also less of tendency toward clinging at attachment, because you're just breathing in the air and letting it go without any grasping at it. So you simply are aware of the breath, the in and out flow of the breath. So the focus on the breath when we are meditating is said to be very important. And also it is said that this is how the Buddha himself had attained enlightenment. Before enlightenment, he was secluded in isolated places and was meditating, focusing on the breath, observing the breath. And also after he had attained enlightenment, when he gave meditation instructions to the Sangha, to the followers, he gave them the instruction on how to focus on the breath. And so that's also written down in many of the sutras. And so since we are followers of the Buddha, we can practice in that way, because the Buddha gave us this method with great skillful means and great compassion. And the Buddha knew what practices of benefit and what practice would lead to a certain fruition, a result. So he was skillful in means, and also he was very compassionate in giving us all of these methods. So for the breath meditation, it begins first with effort. So first it is you're making an effort to focus on the breath, and then gradually, as you habituate to it, it naturally becomes effortless, and it always happens when you're breathing. Also, in the Mahamudra instructions, it is explained that there is a meditation that is with support and meditation that is without support. And if it's without support, then one method without support is to focus on the breath. So whether one looks at it from the sutras or the tantras perspective, the focus on the breath in meditation is said to bring forth many great qualities. So therefore, to practice focusing on the breath is very important.
Thank you very much. Zunandeya damje zebanye tovanye be janan baze jigan anja balain dovaye zeben zolen dova dova sho simchene ba jinye ba nyurde nele tajir dovene na mala ba da yongwa me ba jo Mary being ailing with a disease, be freed at once from every malady. May all the sickness that afflicts the living be instantly and permanently healed. Thank you so much.